Advancing the cause of liberty takes more than just coming up with ideas. It means making them happen. This is Society and the State. Life, liberty, and your pursuit of happiness. Now, your hosts, Connor Boyack and Brian Hyde.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 122. We're going to talk today about the propaganda on your radio and talking about a new organization trying to kind of bring some balance to some of the messages that we hear. We're talking with Pagona Stratoudakis, who is the executive director of a fairly new organization called the American Media Council. Pagona, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Good morning.
So let's maybe start with kind of like a very broad question. Why is it when I hear all these public service announcements on the radio that they all seem to be like left-leaning or big government or things like that? Is there some sort of trend that's happening here, or why is it that they tend to lean a little bit that way? Or am I wrong in characterizing it that way?
I don't think you're wrong at all, actually. So the reason you're hearing that is because most of them are produced by a left-leaning organization called the Ad Council, which started actually as part of the government to sell war bonds in the 40s during World War II, and since then has continued to partner and promote really big government ads and big government messages that really depend on groupthink and a dependency on your local and state governments to get things done. So that's exactly why you're doing it.
So how is it? Is it this? So they were started or funded by the government. Is the Ad Council just a traditional nonprofit now? Are they still receiving government money, or what's kind of the relationship like there?
Yeah, the relationship is that they partner with, so they work with large nonprofits. They are a quasi-private nonprofit, and the reason I say that is they charge all of their partners that they work with, and a majority of their partners are government entities and government agencies. And they work with them to promote those agency messages. They also work with very, very, very large nonprofits that receive a tremendous amount of government funding. And so, of course, the messages will move that way.
So what has been, I mean, and Brian, you're going to have some interesting insights here because Pagona's, I should explain for Pagona, Brian was a radio host for a number of years. So Pagona, is it that, like, let's say I have a radio station, let's say I'm even a conservative radio station, why am I hearing messages from the Ad Council on a local conservative radio station? You would think that if the owner of that station or the sponsor of the program or whatever is more right of center, why are they featuring ads from the Ad Council?
Yeah, even though that radio has the highest reach amongst all audience, all different media. So they beat out, I think they're at 93% of adults can be reached with audio or with radio. And that beats out web, that beats out television, that beats everything. Even though that being said, about 30% of their airtime goes unsold. And then you can't have dead air on the radio, right? So every time that there's time left, they insert PSAs, and about 19 out of 20 PSAs is produced by the Ad Council. And you know what? They produce good ads, good in terms of production. Clearly, I don't agree with the message. I think that of all of them, but they do good work, and they have those relationships. They've been doing this for 70 years. You know, the Ad Council's everywhere. They're trusted. You think Smokey the Bear. And so they just production managers, and everyone slips them in. And a lot of, you know, they're not going to spend too much thought on screening out PSAs. However, there's also never been an alternative. And so that's really what AMC wants to do, is that we want to provide conservative radio shows, stations, with an opportunity to play PSAs that resonate with their beliefs, resonate with the beliefs of the host. And we do that by partnering with smaller nonprofits, libertarian conservative organizations, and creating PSA campaigns that can not only educate people about and empower individuals about their freedom and the things they can do and how to exercise their rights in ways that will improve their lives, but also to introduce them to organizations that are smaller, that are doing this kind of work, that have been around for years, that don't get that kind of media attention that the Ad Council would bring.
Pagona, one of the questions I'd like to ask you is, are the ads or the public service announcements provided by the Ad Council, are they ever used in connection with a radio station's obligation to serve the community to which it broadcasts? That's one of the conditions of having your FCC license. Is this part of the justification? You mentioned, filling ad time or filling unsold ad time. But have you ever heard anything about maybe approaching it from that angle? Well, we also do this because, we want to fulfill the public need, and so we just run these, public service announcements that we get from the Ad Council.
So I do think to a degree it is, there's a certain amount of time that is typically allotted. However, I don't believe it's mandated anymore on radio. And you could correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I understand, it's no longer mandated that you have to spend a percentage of your airtime donated to nonprofits. However, it's in their interest to do so. And so, of course, wanting to work with local PSA producers, local nonprofits that are doing things, that is something that is to the benefit of the radio station in terms of their outreach, particularly when they have that time available.
I just know when someone tunes in on an early Sunday morning, and I mean early, like 6 a.m. or earlier, they're going to hear public affairs programming, sometimes even on their favorite music stations. And, it's, boy, sure is interesting when I tuned in to, hear some great country music, and instead I've got, somebody talking about reapportionment or something. But that's part of the public affairs role of the radio station.
That could be true, but I don't think that it directly affects the ad. I think the Ad Council is out there. They have all of these ads. They're producing. They have the relationships, and therefore they are getting the airtime.
Well, I love the idea of an alternative to. I'm sorry, but I'm going to typify the Ad Council ones. Always reminded me of Big Mother. Wagging a finger at us and telling us now, you'll wear your seatbelt and you'll, embrace diversity and don't be exclusive and any number of things and eat healthy. But I sure would love to hear some more non-governmental messages taking up that airtime.
So, Brian, you in your experience, and you've been on some very conservative stations in your career. And so this is something you did notice, it sounds like. You did tell us a little bit about that.
We all rolled our eyes, depending upon, which public service announcement it was. And Pagona's absolutely right. They tend to be more left-leaning because they're coming, through a federally funded organization. So I'm very interested in hearing more about this. And Pagona, I'll happily spread the word to my friends in radio and tell them, you don't have to just run the Ad Council once.
And so, Pagona,
I appreciate that.
Who are you partnering with so far? You talked about some small organizations trying to kind of get these messages out. Give us a little snapshot of a group or two that you're working with to kind of explain to the listener what this looks like.
Sure. Well, our first campaign, which launched in July nationally and is now running through the West and through the Midwest, is with an organization called Young Voices, which works and trains young libertarian journalists and really trying to build a workforce, society of journalism that will share different ideas. And with them, we created a campaign called UseYourSpeech.com because we believe that free speech is important, that there's no question there, if you ask me, and I'm sure if I ask you or your listeners. And it's important that people understand that and have the tools to use it. And so one thing that we would like in all of our PSA campaigns as well, all of our ads will have some sort of call to action that will help the listener participate. And not just participate like signing up for to vote or learn things. We want to give them a guide on how to empower themselves. And so with Young Voices has created a guide on how to write op-eds and how to write letters to the editor. And you can come to the website, which is useyourspeech.com, listen to PSAs, and then sign up to download that, which is a guide to how to use your free speech.
That sounds great. And
that's one of the
yeah. So that's one example. Do you have another one to share just to kind of round things out a little bit more?
Well, we're working right now to we really want to highlight the importance of economic freedom, and that means the ability to work and the dignity of work. And so right now we're working, fleshing things out with several different organizations that are working on this issue, whether it's litigation to help remove barriers to jobs, or groups that are just doing a lot of outreach and policy work to promote the important alleviation of regulations that will allow people to work. So we have a series of videos that'll be coming out and that are PSA form as well as radio PSAs for that.
So if I am working with a nonprofit or there's a nonprofit I support, it sounds like it's in that nonprofit's interest to partner with the American Media Council to try and effectively, if I'm understanding this right, get free advertising, because your guys' value proposition is that as you build relationships with radio station owners and so forth who are looking to fill dead time but want to fill it with, let's say, freedom-minded messaging rather than, to use Brian's term, big mother messaging. Your guys' value proposition is you can help, let's say, my nonprofit get advertised on the radios in our local community whose radio stations are partnering with you guys. Do I understand the mechanics there correctly?
A huge part of what we're trying to do is spread these ideas. These are ideas that have nonprofits. There's hundreds of nonprofits around the country that are doing fantastic work to promote individual liberty and individual freedom. And their resources, which are very limited because none of them receive government funding, their resources should be dedicated to doing their work. And whether that is their legal foundation representing people, whether they're doing policy work, outreach, training, education, all of these things, we want them to keep their resources where that is, and we will focus on building and creating PSAs that are dynamic and innovative and empowering on their behalf in partnership with them, and we will focus on those relationships. It's really just separating what we're doing. You guys go out and do all the hard work and the good work, and we will focus and put all of our energy into creating campaigns that we can get out and really let people know that that these ideas exist, that these organizations exist. I think it's really important. I grew up in California. I'm still reside in California, and these are messages that would never get to me had I not sought them out myself. And it was really a fluke to start with that I even came across the ideas of libertarianism, the ideas of helping people. By the more I'm empowered, the more my community benefits from that. And so AMC really wants to just go out there and do that and offer it to everyone, all communities, and really reach people that have never heard these ideas before. And then it's, with your listeners and stuff, and we're bought in. We have this idea, but there's a lot of people out there that are not contacted, they're not engaged with. And so that's what we're hoping to do.
I'm really encouraged to hear of the work you're doing with Young Voices. At the State Policy Network's annual meeting just a few weeks back, I had a chance to meet some of the individuals from there. Connor, actually one of your coworkers at Libertas, is part of that lineup.
That's right.
And it's so encouraging to see new blood, fresh faces, fresh voices, and to a person, everyone I have talked to is really sharp. I mean, these aren't just people who are trying to fill up airtime by hearing themselves talk. They have messages with real substance, and I'm happy to see that you guys are working with them. I was thinking you were legit beforehand, but now I'm like, oh, you're legit plus.
They're fantastic people, and there's a lot of other organizations that are just as impactful as them, and we want to bring all the attention we can to them and their work and what they're doing, as well as educate the public about really important things that can help them improve their lives and get them involved with their communities and in a voluntary way to affect some change.
That's great, Pagona.
And the change they want to see.
That's awesome. Pagona, we're going to link to your website on our show notes page for our listeners, which is societyandthestate.com/122. Will be the episode for today. Pagona is executive director of the American Media Council, trying to balance a bit of the propaganda on your radio waves and get some more liberty-minded messaging out. And so if you know a nonprofit, be sure and point them to the American Media Council and try and build out the network and get the message spread. Pagona, thanks very much for joining us today and sharing what you're up to.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to Society and the State. For show notes, archives, and more great content, visit societyandthestate.com.